All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jamie Shabbat. I am the Assistant Director of Career Resources and Programs here in Alumni Relations. I'm thrilled to bring you the Professional Development webinar series. Today we have Chris Lucas with us. We are very honored to have him. He's had a very busy spring going into summer. Chris is a co-founder of Ompractice, an online yoga studio that has become wildly successful, and he's met the need and filled a gap in the yoga genre and bracket to be able to be really successful. They've been in business for less than a year. He is a 2000 graduate of UNH, and he is going to talk to us a little bit today about building a business that matters and how when you build a business that is client-centric based on meeting the needs of the people that you serve, how you can be wildly successful. And I'm going to pass it over to Chris to kick us off. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jamie. Hey, everyone. I'm Chris. It's the first time I've really been described as wildly successful, so I'll just keep that. Thank you. And yeah, as Jamie said, I'm excited to talk about just sort of, again, the foundations of building a business that matters. And I'm also living proof that you don't have to do it right away. So wherever you are, if you're 18 years out of school or 8 months, or 8 years, all of this is applicable. And I really just tried to make it work for you, whether you're, just starting out, you have an idea, you are gainfully employed at a large multinational and just looking to put a different kind of DNA into your company. And yeah, there's lots of time for Q&A at the end. And I might also have some free yoga for anyone on this, for either you or those you know and love, because I get to just do that now. And I guess we can just start right at the beginning. And I want to just kind of preface this, that there is a difference between just kind of doing a business and assembling a company that matters to people. One is deliberate and one can just sort of happen. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about is what I've done wrong over the last few years, and sort of how it's going right and what I've learned from that. So yeah, I guess the best place to start is this doesn't happen on accident, although sometimes it looks like it. I left UNH with a BS in wildlife management in 2000. So obviously 17 years later, I'm standing in the White House for the 6th year in a row as a yoga teacher. And I can honestly say right at the top that my experience at UNH and my degree in particular is really responsible for the whole trajectory, even though I never took the obvious route that it had in mind for me. After a number of years working in the Massachusetts state legislature, national nonprofits, owning a digital consulting company for pro athletes, and all the while being a yoga teacher, so that's about a dozen years now, I created my current company last summer called Ompractice, which, as Jamie said at the top, it's just a platform for teachers to teach live interactive classes that they can be taken or taught from anywhere, and it basically looks like this. But so that's enough about Ompractice for now. I'd like to start in terms of when you want to build something, that you start with what the whole point of this is. I have a lot of stuff to say, and sometimes my wife will say, Chris, what's your point? And then I can say the thing. And I urge you to kind of start there. There's a difference between wanting to accomplish something meaningful and creating a business to do that. So while you might have a goal to accomplish something great for a certain kind of person or groups of people or animals, all great stuff, the point of this exercise is to design a business that expands your impact and becomes a system that works towards collective goals of the business and the people that make it up. So your purpose of your business is a different thing than the goals of your business. And how you land on your purpose, it's tempting to come up with a lofty purpose or statement and then try to work backwards and accomplish it. But that, for me personally, has resulted in a lot of wheel spinning. I started a consulting agency that way. That was absolutely harder than it needed to be because that was the approach I took. I wanted to change the ways, fans and athletes interact with one another. And that's a want, not a purpose. And so I would encourage you to say, the best way to land on your purpose is to be declarative about why you exist in the first place. So to take the consulting agency example, which still exists right now and they're doing well, I stepped back from it to do what I'm doing now. But we had a lot of lean years in the beginning, particularly because we hadn't gotten this part right at the top, which is, so, I wanted to change the way athletes and fans interact. And what I should have said was, we exist to teach athletes how to best use emerging tools to own their relationship with fans and partners. And that sentence would have saved me a year of just flailing around and doing everything just to kind of keep it alive, rather than knowing what my purpose would be and why we exist. So in addition to your purpose, there's also a promise that you're making as you're building this, or whatever your business looks like. And essentially every activity you take in creating a business that matters needs to deliver on the explicit or implied promise you are constantly making over and over to your customers, whether you have them yet or not. Think very hard about what you are promising and make sure you actually can do the thing you say you will do within the expectations you've set for your customers and your team. So the promise might change, and better to realize that early than late, but your promise is also not a mission or a lofty goal. Your promise is what you're going to be judged by, both internally and externally. So a good way to think about this is asking yourself, how do we want to leave people? My experience has always kind of shown that people rarely remember what I've said, but they almost always remember how I've made them feel. And that goes for the same for building an organization. And part of, so you've got a purpose, you know the reason why you exist, but is there a clearly articulatable, that was a terrible way of saying that word, but is there a clear problem or solution? Do you know what you want to do and the change you want to make? And can you clearly articulate it? I've worked for huge nonprofits in media and advocacy departments, and we had entire budgets dedicated to creating and refining messages designed to address these kinds of simple questions. Can we say it clearly? The problem, can we say it? The solution, can we say it? What proof do we have of the problem? Why are we uniquely qualified to do this? And why is now the compelling time for it to be addressed? And I'm not saying these are things you can just kind of riff off and you check. These really require a lot of thought and experimentation. And again, my consulting company initially was plagued with issues around this, because in our early days, we were so focused on just getting any kind of work so that we could still be alive. We didn't focus on foundational information like this. It made us take work that, made a few bucks, but it had absolutely no long-term game at all. So we wasted a ton of time, and that's a great way to kill a business. So the best way to kind of come to answers that you feel are defensible and actually give you momentum is to test them. And there's a rubric for this that I recommend, which is the business model canvas. And I'll do a larger version of this so you can see it. But really, all you want to do is design tests that are going to give you straightforward feedback and minimize any variables as you do it. So now I make lists of tests that I want to run with our current company, because whatever your business is, whether it exists or not, especially if it's a startup, is essentially a hypothesis, which you then design tests that will either support or invalidate your hypothesis. My favorite sort of hypothesis that I go back to over and over, but especially in the beginning, is, will people pay money for this, whether it's a product or service? That's a great place to start. And so, I highly recommend the business model canvas. Some of you might know what it is. Some of you might not. It's free on Wikipedia. You can go right to it, download it. A much higher res version of this, by the way. I use this often as a way to view our business. And what's great is that at first you might not be able to answer any of these categories or any of the questions within, but you can start with one and kind of work your way through. And over time, you're able to just kind of create new scenarios where you can answer them specifically and strategically and start kind of checking them off. And again, if you're a startup, like I am right now, certainly, turning all of these boxes, from question marks to check marks, like that basically takes risk off the table, whether we're going after investors or not. It increases the valuation of our company, and I highly, highly recommend running small, cheap, informal tests in all of these areas. Of course, the hardest thing to test, and it's not really in here, is your team. So let's talk about that. Your company is who you surround yourself with. Yes, true. I also believe your company is, especially for a business that you have decided you want to make matter on the planet, it's who you surround your customers with. And basically, a business is basically shorthand for a group of people with ideally a common objective. So what people forget or overlook is what you think the business is as its sort of creator, founder, whatever you want to call yourself, and what your customers think it is can vary widely. And your job is to close that gap. And so, you might want to have a great corporate culture and a great customer experience, but one or both of those could be terrible. And both of those go back to your team. So this isn't about sales and marketing. This is about fulfilling your promise. So back at the top, right? Are you really who you say you are, especially to your customers? Are you proud of who is on your team? So for example, this is my team. In less than a year, this group of individuals, and there are other folks who aren't on it just for sake of space, like they've taken something from an idea that kind of like bonked around in my brain for a while to an actual product that people pay money for, and has given a number of other folks like yoga teachers a new way of earning money that is meaningful to them. So they're professionally and financially meaningful moments for them. And so we also don't know, your team isn't just who is paid or who is sort of on salary or contractors or whatever. Like your team is also who you go to where you're weak. So, we know we don't know everything, and we have amazing advisors who have, filled our gaps, who can help us where we need it and open new lines of relationships or customers, all that. And I think it's really important to notice that it's easy to get caught up in who's awesome on your team and who you want to have on there. But also, once you've got an idea, be really objective about, what's missing. Who is kind of working in an area that really isn't a great fit. And rather than avoid an awkward conversation, ideally, a great team is one you can be really frank and open with. So, do you know where your team gaps are now? And are you constantly looking at your business, looking at your organization, and recalibrating in that area? Do you have a sense of where people's talents and their interests align with what the company needs? And that's a tough needle to thread, but man, when it works, it works. Dr. Peekins at UNH, he taught my public policy class, which altered my professional and personal trajectory quite a bit. When he said in class, I'll never forget it, said, wildlife management is not animal management, it's people management, because there's no way you're ever going to tell a bear where to cross the road. And that stuck with me in terms of like how we create a business and how we create team. That you're not going to be able, you're going to have to put your people hat on at all times, even if what you think you do doesn't involve them. So where in your organization, or whether it exists again, or whether it's a plan, where are you trying to get a bear to cross the road? And where are you instead devising sensible ways for people to succeed and feel free? And one way to do that, is to be deliberate about your company's culture. These are sort of 3 C's, sounds kind of cheesy, but these are 3 elements that I have found when they're there, it's amazing. When they're not, you notice it. And that's celebration, community, and causation. So really the quick version of this is, who are you celebrating within your community? And what kind of transformations will you or are you causing among your company internally and your customers? And this is one of those things that I absolutely used to think was a luxury or a sweetener, or boy, it'd be nice if we can really get to culture someday. And now it's a place I pay so much attention to, because the culture of the business, I have found this personally, it comes from you, whether you're at the top or not, it comes from you wherever you are in that company. And so right from founder to contractor, it's so important. And you're either adding to or subtracting to the culture in every single moment and every single decision. I have known Gary Vaynerchuk for a number of years, and while I don't necessarily subscribe to everything he says, I caught him talking at one point saying, every executive in his company, basically their title is HR and whatever their title is. And I think that's a really important distinction to make, that no matter where you are within the organization, you have a responsibility towards people's needs being met. And this is why personally, I would encourage you in terms of if you're building a business that you want to make an impact on people or the planet in some way, retain the humanity, right? So are you creating a culture that retains humanity or diminishes it? So I find a great way, one thing we've taken out of our business completely is the term lead, right? Are you going to refer to people as a lead? This entire human being, their entire life experience has just been distilled down to a lead. And I've worked for companies that I know they saw their substantial customer base as nothing more than an ATM. And they just tried to prod people into spending more and more. And it looks like it works, but at a severe long-term and culture cost. So how you talk about your customers to each other is how people will judge your company's ability to survive. And it's really important. You might think that this is a private conversation or word gets out. People can smell it when you don't mean it. So I encourage you, if customers are your thing, and you're not gonna have a business very long without them, you must want to make their lives better. And not just like, oh, well, I want to make their lives better to get money. It's like, no, I want to make their lives better. And we've figured out how to make it profitable so we can keep doing it. But you're gonna run into brick walls over and over. Maybe not all at once, or maybe everything falls apart at once, but I promise you at some point, everything will go wrong. And building a business requires a new relationship with failure, breakdown, frustration, disappointment, all the stuff that you want to avoid. Here it comes. But it also tests your ability to forgive yourself and others. I found, I have a wildly new relationship with forgiveness. And I've become willing to rapidly forgive people rather than hold grudges, because the biggest pitfalls I've seen and experienced are not systematic. Those things can be fixed, but resignation, grudges, defensiveness, all of which I've been personally guilty of at one time or another, I'm sure. That is just poison that bleeds into everything. But so the bad news is that's hard to detect early on. That said, if you've got a good culture, it bubbles up quick. But most pitfalls like this can be avoided or mitigated through culture anyway. So a culture steeped in reaction is desperate, it's afraid, people will do anything to plug the hole without thinking it through, anything to avoid blame and responsibility. And a culture that fosters response gets better, more thoughtful actions in the face of adversity. And people know how to own a mistake in a way that still acknowledges its impact and gravity on the company, especially when it comes to money. People get really weird about money. Whether you're, again, you've got an idea, you're starting a company, you're looking for investment, you're just working at a company and everyone's trying to find out what everyone else makes, but then they want to pretend that they're not trying. It's weird. People get weird. And I've worked in industries in sports where money is literally the preferred way to rank yourself and create your value in comparison with others. It's crazy. And I've worked in government where it is tossed around because no one's watching anyway. And in the yoga world where I, live and work now, and I've been a digital director for a yoga company for 6 years. I've spent a long time in the yoga world. It is absolutely not cool to want it or even to try and make it. And yet it's still a $32 billion industry. So I've basically come out believing it's just talk about money transparently, unapologetically, and people relax. I've told investors, teachers, my team, everybody up front, I intend to be extremely transparent and talk about money, and in a way that communicates to you, I'm really uninterested in it being weird. And if I seem weird about money, tell me. So for example, with our first investor at Ompractice, they offered us a very large check and I walked them back from it. Not because I was worried about having my equity dilute, all sorts of weird stuff that I actually didn't really even know that much about. I was more worried that too much money would kill us. And it was more important for me to show that we're responsible stewards of any and all investment. And I just wanted to show that the thing worked, and to run certain tests from before. Well, people pay for this before we really started going for funding. and sharing my thought process rather than just grabbing all the cash I could and like crossing my fingers. Sharing that process actually has created a much better relationship with them, and we're going to have a much larger investment over time than that first one. So I go back to that and see that as a moment where, oh, I am who I say, like our company is who we say we are. We had a moment where, you know, who we are when no one is looking is going to tell you so much about your business. And that was a moment where no one was looking. In fact, people encourage us to just get as much as you can. And instead we just, you know, we were honest, and that worked. I encourage you to do it in all things outside of your business too. You know, we knew that we wanted to make money and empower others to do the same. And it just wasn't important for us to be seen as a fundraising unicorn. And so as our plan, you know, our plan anyways is really to pass most of the money on to teachers, which creates other short and long-term strategic advantages. You know, we decided we were just going to be epically frank about money, both with teachers, investors, and everyone so far has really appreciated that, especially the teachers, we've tied our economic success to them. Money is basically energy, and you know, we use ours to show what we mean, what we say. Again, that whole promise thing. And you know, we've looked at the market, we've made initial pricing options, and we've played out scenarios, which you'll do, you know, once you have money, okay, you've got a plan, and now you can start doing projections. You know, and I encourage you 3 sets of projections: a very conservative one, a moonshot. You know, it's okay to think, what if this takes off? In fact, people want to know you've thought like that. Whether or not it comes to pass, but that you see a possibility is so important to others you're trying to bring in and enroll into what you're doing. And then of course, making an oh crap version, where if it all just, everything goes wrong and stays wrong, you also want to have thought about that first too. It's likely that none of them will come to pass. It'll probably be a combo, but the exercise itself starts showing you how much you are willing to think about this kind of stuff, especially when you don't want to. And if you find yourself not wanting to even do that much, maybe do something else, you know? So you've got a plan for your money, a plan for your team, you know what you want to do. Then it becomes about communicating it to a larger audience, and both internal and external, they'll grow. But I want to take a step back because this is a spot where I really see it go sideways. So how you share your company to current and potential customers matters, and the biggest marketing and communications folks fall into this treating customers like things trap. It's such a trap. I've spent enough time in the land of both issue advocacy and sort of general corporate world to know that if you want something done, you don't need customers. You need constituents. You need grassroots. You need people who will take some kind of action based on your request, based on your reputation. So this again goes way back to the beginning. Their willingness to take an action on your behalf goes back to becoming a referendum on how well you've lived up to your promise and if they've noticed. I've spent years figuring out ways to turn online interaction into offline action. It's super hard work. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But most people don't want to do it because it's time consuming and it doesn't appear to scale. And the great thing about building a business, especially early on, is you don't have to worry about, will this scale yet? It's really tempting. People are going to tell you, does it scale? Does it scale? You know what? Make it work first. Taking hours every day to personally respond to seemingly random messages from customers, it can seem like a waste of time. It is rarely ever that. Being on the front lines, especially in the beginning, you can never spend enough time interacting with customers. One-to-one interaction, whether it's as research, you just call them up. If they're not a customer yet, even say like, I'm doing market research and I want to know X, Y, and Z, and I'm told, you know, I've seen through your experience that there's something for me to learn here. That kind of one-to-one interaction, not only were you going to get valuable information, but that's the kind of thing that people turn around and share without you asking them to. And it's a fantastic way to show who you are to the larger public. A few companies do it, again, because it's hard and because you actually have to be interested in your customer. So again, how you really feel about your customers shows up here. And sort of at that first one, what I mean by persuasion versus victory with is that it's one thing to talk at people. It's another to enroll them in what you're doing and give them the opportunity to pull you across the finish line. when you can make your victories theirs, your company's victories, your organizational victories, when you make those also your customer victories, they begin to feel ownership over shared success. And they not only want to support the company, they'll defend it, and they want to make new things possible. And finally, I would say, this last bit, like it feels kind of, I don't know, like kind of like heartfelt, like rah, 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 but it's also true. When you give your customers agency, when you give them some rope for your company and allow them to get involved in ways that you can't necessarily control, it works out in a way that you couldn't have planned if you wanted to. I mean, I know this because it's happening, with us now. And while some, anecdotal social proof is nice, it's not something we hang our hat on. We say, okay, what really matters to us? And I would request that, again, in addition to your purpose, your promise, your culture, that you look and create a statement of like, where are you all going? And so for me, I'll share mine. For Ompractice, we've decided it's not about going to be our next fundraise or our internal milestones. That's not where we're going. It is where we're going is creating millions of small victories for individual people, getting them into a yoga class or onto their mats when they couldn't or wouldn't have before, and where people really get to be at home in class. So that's probably a good place to stop and say first, thank you to all of you for hanging with me this long. And I'm happy to take any questions you have. I also, you can see at the bottom, you can have as much yoga as you like with that code, whether or not you practice, somebody else, it's on the house. I would love for everyone from UNH ever to just have all the free yoga they could ever want. And again, I get to do that for now, so let's do it. So I guess if you have questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A box there at the bottom of your screen. You might have to bring your mouse down there. And yeah, and I'll do my best to answer them honestly, or I will tell you I don't know if I don't know. So we have one question from Andy who asked, how do we create the culture, or how do you create the culture of your business? And what do you do to engage your employees, and how do you measure it? That is a fantastic question. So I would actually go sort of answer that middle part first. So the best way to engage your employees is to first know what engages them, right? So I see a lot of companies make the mistake of doing like a lot of like, we're all going to meet up at the bar. And whereas more and more, A, people don't want to drink around their coworkers. B, it also sends a certain kind of message of this is kind of like our culture. And you don't have to look much further than like Uber, where it kind of created a bro culture that really metastasized and snowballed in a way that was a wrecking ball later down the road. So I would say, look at the way to engage your employees that are consistent with your company's values. So for us, yeah, we look at our company and say, like, what are we well suited to share with our employees? We're obviously attracting a certain kind of person. That said, we want our team and our employees, like, we want everything to reflect our customers. So what do our customers also enjoy? So yeah, there's yoga, CrossFit, just kind of being out in the world and enjoying yourself and other people. So, we get outside a lot. Outside's great. We just kind of hang out. So again, not forced, but just making an invitation. And sometimes that's online, sometimes that's in person. I really encourage you to get everybody together in a room once or twice a year in a way that doesn't necessarily have a hardcore agenda, but gives the employees the opportunity to create that agenda. And measuring it, I think you can make your own sort of, I was going to say KPIs, but you can make your own benchmarks beforehand, and you can actually share those with your employees. So asking them about, well, what are the meaningful activities that show you we're going to a place that's shared? So you can do surveys, right? You can do like, how happy are you in your position? How well do you know your other 3 coworkers? Do you know anyone else who's not on your team? So there's those kinds of, in terms of relationship, I would highly recommend finding ways that work for your business, right? That show you people are connected to one another, and show you that people are satisfied and have a path to advance. So if you're getting feedback from people that they're like, well, obviously your turnover rate is going to be an important metric. But also, are people excited to share with you about what they see for themselves the next couple of years? And are they willing to share with you what they see for themselves in a way that like they might not want to be at this company, right? Like I definitely get that, and I'm excited to support people to do that, because what you want to really do is create a culture that gets out of your business's bubble, because then they go into other companies and those companies become friends, partners, customers. And so again, the way you create the culture of your business is you do it on purpose and you do it every day. And that sounds like kind of hard and mundane, but honestly, like once you've made a decision of who you're going to be to other people, it starts to become pretty automatic. And you know when it's not a fit too. So Andy, I hope I answered your question. Feel free to just write in the Q&A that I did not. I was asked, someone asked that they're curious about the germination of the business idea. So how did I come up with the idea from Ompractice? And did I know right away that it was well suited to become a business? Or did I have to kick it around a while to get it where I felt it could become a business? I'm smiling because boy, did I kick this thing around. I actually tried to start it in 2010. And I did this really crude mashup of MindBody Online, which is a scheduling software, and Skype, which the video quality of Skype in 2010 was just brutal. And so and the reason I'd done it is I lived in Boston. I was teaching in Boston, and my wife got an amazing opportunity in San Diego. So we moved, and I couldn't drag my students with me, and I really wanted to. And I just started teaching, and I just kind of lost all this momentum, and I was really bummed. And I also was like, the internet exists. Why can't we do it on Skype? But the video technology was not there. It was really rough. So I tried variations of this and ultimately like put it on the shelf. And actually this past spring, so spring 2017, my wife asked me, she's like, whatever happened to that thing? You know, the yoga video thing. And I was just kind of telling her, the video technology wasn't it totally exists now. We should do it. And so by June, I had put the kernel of a plan back into place. August, I had recruited some people to help me kind of like just kick the tires, as you said. And then September, we had paying customers. December, we had a pretty decent investment, and we've just kind of been off to the races since. I also knew it was well suited to become a business because I knew it was a problem other yoga teachers and other yoga students had. So teachers kept losing their students when they moved, like I did. Students kept losing their teachers when their favorite teacher moved. And I felt that a number of times. So I knew that there were groups of people who wanted to connect with one another, and there was just no great way to do it. And I also knew that yoga teachers are not making great money, and that's insane because it's super easy to do it if we set it up right. So we set it up so that the math for Ompractice works, that teachers get paid above market. Because I'm not interested in an entire generation of talented teachers deciding to do something else just because they couldn't spend all that time commuting for low rates. So I hope that answered your question. Jamie asked, how do I balance the high touch relationship building with individual customers and everything else, especially early on? So when you have a small team and you feel like you're doing it all. I manage them. I'd like to believe I haven't diluted the quality of the relationship, but I would say the way I've managed it so far is by being really deliberate in recording who I've talked to, when, what it was about, like even like in a Google Doc spreadsheet, just taking ruthless track of who you're talking to about what, when, and why, and what the next step is. So I don't have to keep it all in my head. I have that open to our entire team. So I'm not keeping certain conversations secret, because I think that breeds sort of distrust. Like we are an open book, and it attracts a certain kind of person who wants that, right? But so on the individual customers, we're getting a lot more customers, right? So we also have to create ways for individual customers to share with us their specific concern while still leaving the door open to like learn that other stuff that, they think they've got a problem with the video, but it turns out what they really have an issue with is the times. And we'd never know that unless we followed up. So we've started creating processes about, okay, how do we get back in touch with people? Who's the right person to answer the question, but also who's the right person to listen for the unasked question. And part of that's just training your whole team, right? Is like, okay, you're like, talk to people, but also spend more time listening than talking. And I think that has really helped us keep a high quality relationship. So high touch doesn't mean constant touch. It just means like that it's substantive, that you actually are having real conversations with people in a way that they feel heard, and that you've both learned something and come away with a meaningful action or something actionable. But yeah, I definitely had the experience of like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it all, and now I have to, but I have like these 5-6 people who want my attention, and then also this thing still needs to get built. So I always choose customers first, and then I either wake up earlier or I go to bed later, and I decide which, and then I do it. That's always been my biggest problem, even back like before college. Like I really had to retrain myself in the and how self-sabotaging I could be. And so procrastination is one way of doing it. And other times it's like rationalizing. And now I just like, I get to, right? So I get to talk to these people and I get to build the thing. And it's hard to keep that mindset all the time, but it's been the reason that I've been able to do this happily as long as we've been doing it and building out the team. I'd say like the other little bit of that is that you can train your team to also have high touch relationship building. And then you can also train them to train others. And it's really just by demonstration. So let your team see how you're interacting with people. And not that they have to copy you, but they have to copy the essence of what you're trying to accomplish and give them the freedom to be themselves too, not just trying to be a copy of you doing it. So Jamie, I hope that answered your question. Happy to take any other questions. These are all great. I would love to hear from you what you're trying to build, and if you're hitting like a specific bump or roadblock. It's really frustrating and gratifying at the same time, and often, one right after the other. I would love to hear what you're working on. But yeah, other than that,
awesome, Chris. This is Jamie jumping back on just to wrap up. Thank you so much for everything you just shared. I'm so thrilled for you and the progress you've made with Ompractice. We all at UNHR, and we can't wait to see where you take your business in the future, and hope we get to, watch the growth and be part of your experience. So thank you so much for looping back in with us.
Yeah, be part of it.
Yeah, so everybody on the webinar, please take advantage of that Wildcat code and support a fellow Wildcat starting an amazing business, and a business that does truly matter. And I think that it will go a really long way. If anyone has any last minute questions, definitely pop that into the Q&A. But we also did just launch a poll. If you've been with us through a couple of our webinars, JC and I, my partner here at UNH, have been working to build a really strong foundation of professional development webinars. So we love the feedback. It's tremendously helpful and lets us know whether we're headed in the right direction or not. The quick poll, I believe it's only 3 questions long. So if you wouldn't mind just filling that out before you hop off. Otherwise, we did record this amazing presentation by Chris. So if there's any nuggets of information that you'd like to review or revisit, please, we will have that up on the website as soon as possible, and you'll be able to check that out shortly. But again, thank you, Chris, so much. I know this has been the busiest time of year from you. You've had a lot going on. We're thrilled to have you here.
Yeah, and if anybody has, my email's right there. And if there's anything I can help you with that has nothing to do with Ompractice at all, but you have a question or concern, or just you need a completely objective sounding board, please use that email. It's there for you.
Awesome. Thank you.